Hi everybody, I hope that you're all doing really well. So today I am back to talk about the book A Terrible Kindness by Jo Browning-Wroe. This was actually the first book that I finished in 2023, but it has taken me quite a few weeks to actually kind of pinpoint some of my thoughts about it and to actually feel confident enough to do a review video. And I still don't think I am quite there, but you're just going to get me now as I am. My thoughts about this book today. I wanted to do this book justice, but I think you're just going to have to deal with me as is. I actually picked this up after hearing Scott over at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot talk about it in one of his videos and being particularly intrigued by the premise. At the top of this book we meet our main character of William Lavery. He is a young man from Birmingham from a working class family and has recently qualified as an embalmer, who on the evening of his qualification hears the news about a coal mining spoil tip in Wales which had collapsed, with a large slurry of mining debris collapsing and running down the slope of the valley, hitting a nearby village but predominantly the local junior school. This of course is the infamous Aberfan disaster, which took place on the 21st of October 1966, a tragedy that still to this day has a really lasting legacy, certainly among my parents' generation and older. I will confess that my main exposure to Aberfan came from one of the season 3 episodes of The Crown, which is entirely focused on the disaster and particularly the Queen's controversial delayed reaction to it. But I remember when I watched that episode for the first time with my mum, the title card flashed. The title of the episode is Aberfan, and I remember my mum just gasping and starting to tear up just from the title card. Like, this is the impact that this tragedy had on my parents' generation. But I've never actually read a fiction book that addresses that tragedy, and so when I heard that this is what this book was about, I decided that I had to snatch it up. And I think a lot of people who have heard about this book will probably hear that it does talk about Aberfan. That is what is displayed primarily in the blurb, and I think that's what a lot of people talk about when they talk about this book. So as good a book as I think that this is, I feel like it is worth flagging that this book is not really about Aberfan. In some ways it is. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that the book focuses on the beginning and the end on Aberfan and William's relationship to Aberfan. But to use a sandwich analogy, this is definitely the bread, which takes up maybe like 30 to 50 pages at the beginning of the book and then maybe about 20 pages at the end, whereas the other 300 pages is entirely focused on William's life before and after. It's not to say that Aberfan is irrelevant to this story, but it is definitely not the main focus. Aberfan is able to illuminate and highlight some aspects of William's backstory, but it's also, I wouldn't say, defining of his life. This is a story that very much is leaving you little breadcrumbs along the way, and you are slowly but surely amassing this greater picture of William's life, to which it's useful to see the first chapters in Aberfan, because in later chapters when you learn more about his backstory you can kind of connect these threads together. But I do think it's important to point out that this is not a book that is entirely taking place there, nor is entirely about Aberfan. I would say that this book's main relationship to Aberfan is talking about the lives that are happening outside of tragic events, trying to highlight the complexity of people, rather than what can often happen when tragedies occur, that the figures involved end up becoming very one-dimensional heroes, villains, with nothing else in between. I think this book is really trying to pinpoint the humanity and the complexity of figures that are involved in tragic events, and it really starts with reminding us that these people are not defined by one thing that happens to them. I think during the Aberfan sections that's really illuminated by Betty, who is one of the residents of Aberfan who decides that she's going to help the embalmers take care of the children. And it's really through Betty that we get to learn more about these children as individuals rather than as a collective tragic group. Betty talks to each of the dead children as she takes care of them, and she tells the embalmers different stories about their lives, talking about their good aspects of their personality, but also like not being afraid to talk about, oh, this one was quite cheeky. Oh, she used to cause me all sorts of bother. And that's not being disrespectful, that is actually making this person a person, because we are not good and bad all of the time, and why should a tragedy necessarily take away a person's complexity? And if this is true of the victims, it's also true of the people who are around this tragedy, including William. William is doing a good thing by going to Aberfan, volunteering to help, but that doesn't necessarily make him a wholly good person with pure motives. In fact, we see at the beginning of the book that his reasons for going to Aberfan are a little bit selfish. While he's in the car on the way to Wales, he's thinking about what a great thing this could be for him in his career. He's actually thinking about how this tragedy is going to define his life, define his career. And it's kind of callous, but it's also very human, I think. I think it also highlights how these tragedies don't feel very real. They feel kind of fictional until they're right in front of you. And at that point, it only really hits him what has happened and what his job is, what he has to do next. And then, of course, when you venture further into William's backstory, then even more shades of his character become unfurled. As I say, the majority of William's story is taking place when he is a child and young teenager. We see him with his initial dream not being to become an embalmer like his father and uncle, but actually to become a chorister. We zip back to 1957, where he's just got a scholarship at Cambridge Choir, and for the next few years is going to train to be one of their boy choristers. He's very aware that he's starting off late, being I think about 10 or 11 years old, whereas many of the boys would have started a lot younger, and also because they are boy choristers, their use and their value within this choir is only for as long as they still have very young voices that haven't broken. So he knows he's got a very limited amount of time to kind of make his mark. We see him in this boarding school environment, particularly his friendship with a boy called Martin, but also the obviously competitive atmosphere that this environment breeds. Competition for solos really weighing on William's mind, especially with the pressure from his mother, who is loving but ambitious and also very, very jealous. We realise very quickly that William's mother does not have a great relationship with William's uncle, his father's brother, his father having died a few years prior. And William's mother has been estranged from the uncle since the death of her husband and is very fearful that he might try to steal William away. And added layer to this being that William's uncle is actually a gay man living with his partner at a time, the late 1950s, early 1960s, when this was illegal. So there's also this added danger within the family dynamic. Everybody knows but nobody talks about it, but also because William's mother is so jealous and so bitter, could her vindictiveness eventually lead to her revealing the secret. So everybody in this family is treading on eggshells all of the time. And obviously because we've had the first chapters at Aberfan where we're seeing William as an embalmer, it is clear that William does not end up being a chorister. Music is no longer part of his life as it was so very prominently in his young life. And so there is a bit of mystery surrounding why is that? What happened? What went wrong? We also know at the beginning chapters that he has been estranged from his mother for quite a few years. So through this story, piece by piece, we are uncovering William's past, how what happened to him as a young teenager has affected his adult life, and where he's going to go from here. I have to say this book was really like the perfect first read of the year for me. It covers three things that I really like. Number one, it's historical fiction. Number two, it's about music. Number three, it's a book about death. History, music, death. Three of my loves. Which also makes me wonder if this is like a universal recommendation or if it's just a book that is very tailor-made to me. What could you get out of this if maybe music, history and death are not some of your loves? I would say in that case it's one if you are interested in memory and the fallibility of people's remembrances of the past. We're looking at William's life through his perspective in a third-person limited narration, but it becomes clear later through the story that other characters remember events very differently to William. A theme that is threaded so many times through the story is about both care and cruelty. This is reflected in the main character of William, who reflects both of these things in his personality. He is such a caring person in many, many ways. He's a very introverted, quiet person who is often trying to look after people. We see that especially reflected in his job as an embalmer, where taking care of a person in the moment of their death is so very important, and treating people with respect. But there are also aspects of his character where he can be callous, he can be cruel, which made me actually think that he might be a very similar personality type to myself, because there are aspects where he is pushed to the limit, and that is where his cruelty comes out. That is where he kind of snaps, where things all bubble over, and that's definitely something that I can see in my own personality. I'm somebody who often will keep things very, very much like tampered down, repress feelings, and then suddenly like one thing will happen and then it all bubbles over and I get very snappy, I get very cross and irritated, and it's not an aspect of my personality that I'm very proud of. But by being able to see that in William, this character just felt very real to me. And what is the answer for William? Instead of vacillating between these two extremes of being very, very kind, very respectful, and then becoming very vicious and cruel, maybe the answer is that he needs to be a bit more open and talk about his feelings more. It's also a story about somebody who loses key aspects of their personality, of their lives, whether intentionally or not, then slowly towards the end of the book coming back into themselves and finding a new place for the loves that they had in their past, finding new meaning to your life when the path that was predestined for you does not come to pass, not treating yourself as a failure or a lost cause because you didn't succeed, quote unquote. I am being deliberately very, very vague about this because I don't want to spoil it too much, but I did think it was really, really beautiful, and a month on from reading it I'm still thinking about it. And I still don't think that this book is for everybody. It is once again very slow paced, very character focused, which is absolutely right up my street, but maybe not be for everybody. I would very much recommend listening to some choral music whilst you're reading this, particularly Allegre's Mesiere, I think that's how you pronounce it, which is mentioned many, many times in this book and becomes a very prominent plot feature, with William's main goal being to be able to perform the solos in this song. I just really enjoyed reading a book that was so very steeped steeped in music, and this main character just having such a bond and a love of music. Very inspiring to me as somebody who is a singer and has played musical instruments in the past but maybe is not the best at practicing. One aspect of this book that I think could have improved it slightly would have been giving a little bit more time to William's uncle Robert and his partner Howard. I just wish we'd seen a little bit more of them on the page, a bit more of their personalities. I mean, what we do see is, you know, it is very nice. They are very respectful, very supportive of William, but that really is the extent of their personalities, to be honest. And I wish we'd had a little bit more complexity, especially because this book is so much about complicating our narratives about people and being able to see them as very human and very three-dimensional. I just wish we'd had a little bit more time with them. But otherwise, I did really, really enjoy this. So yes, I don't know if I said everything that I could have done about this book, but I do really heartily recommend it. It was a brilliant start to 2023. I really enjoyed reading it. Just so many different aspects that make up a very perfect novel for me. Do let me know if you've read this book. Let me know your thoughts about it. Alternatively, let me know if you are now interested in picking this up, or just generally leave me a recommendation for some other historical fiction that you think I might like. I would love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.